some of this stuff and get it packed up. So if anybody would like to buy some meat, come on down.
She's in a hurry to go get some of that meat.
Is when we are scheduled to have our annual Christmas dinner. It will be the second Thursday of the month, the 14th. It will be at Guido's, and it will cost $30 a person. And we will accept money tonight. And Kelly?
Janet?
Oh, Janet? Okay, Janet has the list. So wave your hand, Janet, so everybody can see Janet. She has the list. So if you are interested in reserving tonight, you can talk to Janet. You can send us a check or catch one of us and give us a check. What's that?
Zelle.
You can go by Zelle. Thank you. I need people to constantly remind me that there's another way to pay besides cash and check. So Christmas dinner, 5:30 at Guido's on the 14th. Yesterday, as I told some of you already, we started filming the whole process out at Raleigh's, and I think we got a good idea that it's going to be a good documentation of the whole process. And Raleigh was very interesting talking about his grandfather. So we have that, but it will be posted on our YouTube as soon as we get it all put together. We have a few people I'd like to introduce to you. We have Mike Amarelli. Mike, put your hand up. Mike contacted us over email. He is an archaeologist who is a grad student at Johns Hopkins University working on digital curation. And of course, my first comment to him when we actually talked is, what is digital curation? And for those of you, I've looked it up. Curation is the action or process of selecting, organizing, and looking after the items in a collection or exhibit. So he is going to take us on, us being the Historical Society, as his project for a class. And we do appreciate him. We also have with us Chris Glass, visiting from Wisconsin, who maintains our website. And Chris is the one who did all the filming yesterday, primarily. He was the cameraman, Matt was the director.
Correction was the director.
Raleigh has disappeared.
No, he's right here.
Raleigh is, okay, Raleigh, we wanted to thank you. You were walking out the door when we thanked you, so he is back in the back. Thank you, Raleigh. So to get on now with our advertised program about Raleigh's grandfather, I will introduce Raleigh's granddaughter. We're talking about Raleigh Duntly now, who's going to talk about her grandfather. And let me talk a little bit about Ina, who is Raleigh Duntly's granddaughter. I first knew Ina as a student, of course, because I've been here for a million years. She has continued in her grandfather's footsteps, just as her brother Raleigh Davis has, of serving the community. Ina is, or has been, on the school board in Roseman. She's been a teacher in Roseman. She was, for a brief time, one of the administrators out of Tropico. She's very active in an organization, Delta Kappa Gamma, which promotes education. So she has really continued, as has her brother, in serving the community. And it's going to be really fun to hear about her grandfather. So, Ina?
You have to turn the computer on.
I'm a liar.
Is that mic on? Right.
Well, hello everybody. I would say I hope you enjoyed the meal, but I know you enjoyed the meal. Probably I don't compliment you all that often, but I gotta tell you, this is not
uncommonly good. You do great barbecue. So I forgive you for all the times you corked me. And
I'll forget you for the one that I got.
okay, well, how many of you know this song up here on this? Just a few. Everybody knows this. Okay. Well, my husband Glenn is going to join me up here, and I'm hoping you will join us down there. And we're singing a cappella, so wait a second. There was something I wanted to say about this. My mother taught this song to us, and we sang it often. She sang it a lot. We sang it often, and we had some great times. Oops. Great times. Yeah. But it's really a song about freedom and about being yourself and being your best self. And it pretty much exemplifies a lot about my grandfather, who was kind of hard-headed, and in that he was very determined to live a certain kind of life, a really good life. But, well, I'll try and talk to you and tell you some of the information if I don't get too tongue-tied. But right now we're going to sing. Okay, here, you better put this up so just in case. Glenn had to learn the lyrics. I knew them, but I kind of forgot them. So, here we go. Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me out wherever, but I ask you please. Don't fence me in, just turn me loose. Let me straddle my own saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hovels and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in, just turn me loose. Let me saddle my old saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hovels and I can't stand fences. Don't fence part. So, oh, yeah, being a teacher, you have to do this. How many of you have read the excellent article that was online, put online by the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster? Raise your hand if you've read that.
What article?
It's an article about my grandfather. Oh, yeah, whoops. Yeah, a few, but not that many. Okay. That informs me a little bit. Okay.
Recent one, Ina, or one of the older articles?
No, well, it's recent. I think it was written maybe a couple of years ago. I don't know when they published it online, but it is about the history of my grandfather. And so, you all know now why part of why he is called the Barbecue King, because nobody did it better, but my brother does it just as well. So I'm going to start just by telling you a little bit about the life of my grandfather. The picture that's on the screen is of my grandfather as a young, I'm going to say, how old do you think he is in this picture? You do, really? I think he's in his teens, or possibly a little younger. But anyway, he was born in Prairie City, Iowa in 1883. And he had, ultimately, he was the eldest of the family, but he had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And by the time all of them had been born, his parents, George Franklin Duntly and Hannah Milsom Duntly, decided to relocate. A lot of people were coming west at that time, and they did the same thing. In a covered wagon, they traveled from Prairie City to the Antelope Valley. Their intention was to start a freight line in the Antelope Valley. And so, Bob's your uncle, there you know. Now, Raleigh, my grandfather, which I'm going to start calling him Papa because it seems disrespectful to me to keep calling him by his first name. Papa loved, he immediately fell in love with the area, Antelope Valley, the desert, the mountains that surrounded it, and the cowboy life. That was definitely his thing. His parents, after 2 years, had not had success with the freight line and moved the family to Los Angeles. He would maybe have been about 8 at that time. He was not happy to leave the Antelope Valley. And I'm going to stop saying this is the last time. When he was, let's see. The articles say he returned to Antelope Valley in his teenage years. My mother says when he was 12 years old, he ran away from home and came back to the Antelope Valley to be a cowboy. And he had an uncle who had cattle here in the Antelope Valley. So he first worked for his uncle, and a little later on, he went to work for a larger cattle company. And let's see here. the next job he had was with the Cushman Cattle Company or Cattle Ranch. I don't really know what the name was, but here he was. Well, wait a second. I have to go this way. Oh, that's the wrong. Something happened. That's the one I meant. Okay. Here we go. Here's my grandfather. And by that time, you know, he definitely had matured from what you saw in the first photo. And he, the whole time that he was working cattle in the Antelope Valley, as a young cowboy, he took his pay in, not in money, but in cattle, because he really, at that time, already was determined to have a cattle ranch. So, I'm going to peek at my professor. So while he was working, I'm telling you, while he was working for Cushman, he met a person called, his name was William Doyle, and William Doyle had a daughter named Ina. And yeah, and Raleigh Duntly met Ina Doyle while she was riding with her father, you know, working cattle. They took a big liking to one another right away. And my grandfather was no fool, because this lady was a hand with a horse, and she wasn't afraid of hard work. Plus, she was wonderful in every possible way, but that, you know, that goes without saying. So they fell in love, and they got married, and just like that's what happens. They got married in Los Angeles, and that's not them. It is my grandfather and his best friend Ted Atmore. Ted Atmore had a sweetheart too, and my grandparents and Ted and his sweetheart got married in a double ceremony in LA. And here's the proof about my grandfather and my grandmother. Beautiful, beautiful photo. Now. Just give me a second. So, 1 year later, my uncle Lawrence was born, and they were still working cattle in the Antelope Valley. And after my uncle was born, my grandmother was still working cattle with baby on board on the horse. They worked very hard for a number of years, and eventually they were able to buy a ranch, 9,000 acres in Oak Creek Canyon, between kind of Mojave and Tehachapi. All right. Let's see now. That's actually, that's not a photo. This is a painting of the old corral at the ranch. My mother did this a long time ago, obviously. But they moved to the ranch. They already had Lawrence. Let me get this. This is like, they had a daughter, Marjorie, another daughter, Myrtle, which was my mother, and one more daughter, Little Mary. I never met Little Mary. She was ill at a very early age and passed away, but she always was a member of the family. They talked about her, and we all felt like we knew her. So, while, after they'd been there for a little while, and they had 4 children, things were, I think, going along pretty well. And my grandfather was working the cattle. My grandmother was a little too busy for that by then. She was no slouch, though. She was taking care of the children, of course. She was growing a vegetable garden. She was tending a small dairy on the property. And she was the president of the board of trustees, which must have been her and one other person or two, of the little school that had been built in Oak Creek Canyon. There were very few students, the Duntlys and a few Native Americans. Now I say Native Americans. Most of you probably know that I'm assuming this, maybe most of you don't know, that my grandfather learned the art of deep pit barbecuing from the Native American Indians. Oh yeah, yeah. There were some of them who lived on the ranch, and a couple of them that I know of for sure who worked for my grandfather, but there were also other ones who were, just around, outside the ranch, but near neighbors, I guess you'd call them. And that was the beginning, of my grandfather's barbecuing. Let's see. So, ranching was always hard, but it got a lot harder in 1929, at the beginning of the Depression. Life got hard for everyone. My grandmother and my grandfather, they were smart and they were hardworking, and they evidently had some real good business sense, because Papa started, I shouldn't say that, the two of them started having barbecues up at the ranch. Big barbecues up at the ranch, where there might be 200 people coming from from all around and as far as Los Angeles. They would come up the canyon, and let me tell you, that was never a good road, but I think it was barely a road back then, in their Model Ts. And my grandfather did the meat, my grandmother did the fixings, kind of like Raleigh and Teresa. Kind of really like Raleigh and Teresa. And their hospitality was warm and genuine. So they fed them, and they got musicians from somewhere, don't ask me where, but they had musicians, and there was dancing. So fed them, provided the music, and then the guests danced to the music under the stars in Oak Creek Canyon. I do not know how often they did this. I think, from the way that my mother talked, I think that it was more than once a year. I would guess maybe 2, or, at most 3, if that. But that helped them keep the branch going. And then I think the first thing, well, this is another story. By the way, I'm not a historian. In case you had not figured this out already, and everything that is factual, genuinely factual, I really have gotten out of the MOA article and a couple of other articles. But a lot of what I'm telling you is family oral history. And so this is a story. It's not recorded anywhere, but I don't doubt that it's true. So, during the Depression, my grandfather was in town, and I'm going to say it had to either be Tehachapi or Mojave. I don't know which. And there was a restaurant that had lost its power, and it was in a big bind. And the story is that my grandfather took out a shovel, dug a pit that day, went back to Oak Creek Canyon, told my grandmother about it. She prepared all the fixings that would go with the barbecue. And then he rode out and told the surrounding neighbors in the Oak Creek area that there was going to be a barbecue. And now, the story I read this story, and they said the next day there was a barbecue, but there couldn't have been because it takes a whole day just to get the barbecue in the ground, and then it has to cook. So I'm going to say 2 days later, there was a very successful barbecue they saved the ranch with their barbecues up in the canyon, and they saved the restaurant for this I think it was a lady that owned it. And I think that was really the start of the Barbecue King. Okay. Now, I'm going to just finish a little part, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what my grandfather did to become the legend that he did. My grandmother and grandfather lived on the ranch. I'll put the ranch back up. For 47 years. At about that time, my grandmother's health started failing and really deteriorated. So they probably together made the decision to sell the ranch. They sold it to Portland Cement Company for the water rights. And Portland Cement Company still owns it and has the water rights there. They've been generous to let members of our family go back up to be in the area of the ranch now. I don't think there probably is anything left standing. And there wasn't much to begin with. Okay. I'm going to skip. My grandmother's health continued to decline, but they were able to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. They were married in 1905, and they celebrated their 50th in 1955. And it was a big party. I was 4 years old, and I don't remember very much about it except being all dressed up and a lot of people there. And that about pretty much covers my memory of that party. But it was a blessing. And to commemorate their 50th wedding anniversary, my grandfather had a jeweler create this pin. It was a mold of, or I don't know how they did it, but he took a leaf from one of the oak trees up in the canyon, and the jeweler replicated it and stuck a diamond in there for good measure. And he gave that to her for her 50th wedding anniversary. Yeah. And because I was so lucky to be her namesake, when she passed away, my grandfather gave it to me, and it's right here on my heart. Okay. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time, and I wrote a lot of stuff. But I'm seeing that our time is running a little bit short. So I would like to ask if there is anyone in the audience who would like to add some information about my grandfather that, and if there's nobody, I'm going to read a few memories that my cousin Ron Duntly took the time to type up and email to me. He actually lived on the ranch for the first 5 years of his life. And yeah, I'm just going to tell you some of the ones that I thought were interesting, or some a little bit funny. The first one is, he said, first grandma. He said he had, I'll just read it. I have such fond memories of Grandma Ina. I was often at Oak Creek Ranch, usually with my mother before we moved down west of Rosamond. That was after 5 years. My memory of Grandma, she was always in the kitchen, even though she had a big wood cook stove. She also had a modern white enamel gas propane stove. She was always busying herself cooking, and as she did, she seemed to always be softly whistling. You could barely hear it, but I heard it. And he went on to say how when he was in, I don't know which branch of the military he was in, but he was in away from home. And Grandma used to make, well, she made candy too. She loved to make candy. And his favorite was divinity. And she would, often send him a big box of divinity. which he would eat as much as he could of and then share it with the other guys. Yeah. Okay. Now, the next one is a little mischief that he got into along with another one of our cousins, the daughter of my aunt. Her name was Beverly. Down near the creek was a large tack room and another large building like a barn. One day, Cousin Beverly and I found a nest of goose eggs that were rotten. We only knew they were made for throwing, which we did. We threw them against the side of the tack room. They stunk to high heaven. And Papa was not one bit happy when he discovered our trick. I do remember his displeasure, and I don't blame him. Now this one's, well, let's see. I'm just looking at, okay. Another story. These are just little snippets. In the living room of my grandparents' house, there was a very large fireplace, and my memory of it is that it was not made for beauty, but it was simply a utilitarian poured concrete fireplace. By the front door, there was a large quartz rock, larger than a person's head, that was full of small gold nuggets, and across from that was a World War I helmet. I have no idea where the helmet came from, but Papa did tell me that he did some serious prospecting as a younger man in Death Valley area. That little dicker devil, he was all over the place. On one of his trips, he was confronted by Scotty, who gained fame later as Death Valley Scotty, the Scotty's Castle guy. Anyway, Scotty accused Papa of prospecting his land, and I remember the story. As I remember the story, Papa informed him in the strongest terms that Scotty did not own the land. And, oh, yeah, really? Oh, just don't get me started. Anyway, he informed Scotty that he didn't own the land and he could prospect whenever or wherever he wanted. Now, Ronnie had some stories about Papa's, what we call buckaroo days. He was a cowboy. He was not a rancher. You know, all ranchers are cowboys, but not all cowboys are ranchers. This one, an old-timer AV farmer, who he can't remember the name of, told him that he had seen Papa ride a bucking horse down the road south of the center of Lancaster, kind of in the vicinity of Sierra Highway, and he rode him till he quit bucking, and then he rode him back. The bad part about having too many papers is they get them all mixed up. Okay. And there was one other really good one that I wanted to share with you. Oh, okay, here it is. This, the occasion when I heard Papa speaking Spanish. He said it was probably 1960-ish when I was in my 20s. He was lending his name to the Mojave Gold Rush days barbecue. I wanted to get involved, so I was there the night the meat was going in. It was going to be put in the ground. When two Mojave locals showed up and greeted Papa with, "Hola, Rolly, compadre," and so on and on. They were middle-aged Mexican heritage, and Papa and the two had a great conversation in Spanish. Ronnie never knew he spoke Spanish before, but he said if Papa wasn't fluent in Spanish, he sure could have fooled me. Of course, I understood very little of what was being said. I do know that they truly liked Papa and truly cared, and he truly cared for them. It was very apparent. And Ron went on to say, of course, when he was a young buckaroo, many of the cowboys, the vaqueros of the Antelope Valley, were Californios, the descendants of the Spaniards, who were the original cowboys and who the Anglos learned their skills from. And my grandfather definitely had great respect for everyone, the Native Americans, the Spaniards, the Anglos, and probably a whole bunch of other people too. That was kind of just how he was. Okay. Now, I think that'll about do it. And I'm going to, it will really just about do it, because I have just about no more time. So let me just say this. My grandfather had a love of people in general and a generous heart that included family, neighbors, anyone in need, communities, longtime friends, and complete strangers who more often than not became longtime friends. He did a lot for, as far as developing the communities of the Antelope Valley, and he did it by doing barbecues, which he provided all of the ingredients and donated the proceeds to whichever organization, church, school. I mean, he was just all over the place. And I am so honored to call him my grandfather. And I think that my family has a lot of his characteristics that have traveled right on down the line definitely to my mother and father, who continued the barbecues after my grandfather passed away. And all of my brothers, but specifically Raleigh, who is still doing it, with the same good heart that my grandfather did. And thank you very much for coming and listening to me babble on about my grandfather. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank Kern, let's see if I can get this right, Kern Antelope Historical Society. I'm going to just take a minute to say, I remember when Gretchen and a handful of other people who are sitting in this room now were putting this together. It was a small group. I think anybody who was in it was one of the officers. And they have really created a wonderful organization to preserve the history and to inform us, because history is fascinating. I learned a lot trying to get really well prepared, and I got pretty well prepared. I'm gonna give myself that. But I will be I will be looking much further into my family's history. Oh,
What about the park? You didn't mention that.
I didn't mention that. Okay, all right. My grandfather was, received a commendation from LA County Board of Supervisors. Honestly, this is the last thing. And they listed a whole number of good works that he had done. And they dedicated 20 acres of land to be to establish Raleigh-Duntly Park. It is in Lancaster on Avenue K, directly across from the Antelope Valley College. It goes all the way back to, I don't know what the name of this, I mean, it's another number street, I think. There's a Little League field that is very well used. And I believe that the remainder of the 20 acres became a part of the Prime Desert Reserve which I can walk to from my house now. And the last thing I forgot to tell you is there is that picture that I showed you of all those cowboys with my grandfather being the best looking one. There's one that is actually posted. Did I tell you that? It's posted at the Desert Preserve. It's on the trail, the West Trail, and it's very near the entrance to the West Trail. So if you go to the Desert Preserve for a little, and it's a nice place to hike. Look for my grandpa. Thank you again. Thanks, Sue. Oh, yeah. Well, now, this is me. Thank you. Oh, now I have
I know, this was